This event is a renowned marketplace for some of the world's most prestigious and famous real estate projects. Now, the Europeans may be leading the pack here in terms of sheer numbers of projects on display, but now Africa is beginning to share some of the limelight, with investors looking for sustainable ventures in Sub-Saharan Africa.
MIPIM is a nice platform to introduce real estate projects throughout the world. And MIPIM hasn't had a lot of focus on Africa, and actually barely had any focus on Africa. So we felt that it was a good time to start bringing some African projects to MIPIM, so we can start introducing it to the world, basically.
Sub-Saharan African economies have finally got to the point where there's a little bit of order, slightly more transparency. The whole continent is gaining momentum as an investment destination, although some pockets are better than others, and I think it's absolutely perfect time.
Sub-Saharan Africa are the states at the south of the Saharan Desert, and we have about 49 countries making up Sub-Saharan Africa. It covers about 1/5 of the whole world, that's the whole Earth's surface. That's at about 24.2 million square kilometers. It's the second most populous with 936 million people, 37% urban population, and about $1.6 trillion cumulative GDP. The GNP is 1,657. In perspective, this is the size of Africa. It swallows up the whole of the United States, India, Argentina, Western Europe, China, with room to spare. So that gives us an idea of the size of Africa. On the average, we have about 60% of the population under 40, and then very sophisticated population. The urbanization is growing, and we then have a lot of non-oil sectors being developed by the various countries, and a lot of reforms and stabilizing polity, quite a number of which we will hear at the panel. This is just to set the tone. I have on the panel Mark, Louise, Ronald, Ruth, and John. And in that order, they will please introduce themselves.
My name is Mark Bradford. I'm with JLL. My role is to develop our business and capability across 19 countries in the Sub-Saharan African region.
Hello. My name's Louise Brooks-Smith. I have the honour of being the Global President of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors. In my day job, I'm also a planning and development practitioner with experience of working across Africa.
Good morning. My name is Ronald Chagoury. I'm based in Lagos, Nigeria. We're currently building a city right in the heart of the city of Lagos. And well, we're looking forward to showing you more about the different possibilities in the country.
Hi, my name is Ruth Obi. I'm the CEO of Through Invest. I'm a real estate advocate.
Yes, hi, good morning. Thanks to all of you for being here today. My name is John Okonkwo. I'm the Managing Director of Projects for Duquesne Forbes. We initiate and develop large projects across Africa.
Africa had always been this big. It just didn't start today. But up until about a decade and a half ago, there had not been this kind of hype in Africa. So what has changed, John? Why do we have this current interest?
Essentially, there's a broad understanding today that Africa is the last frontier in the world economy. When I was coming here, I saw a sign at the airport that said very soon there won't be any more emerging markets. There won't be any more markets to emerge. And to that, you can add that very soon there won't be any more frontiers to conquer. There's a global recognition that Africa is the last place for very large ticket investments. The World Bank, investment banks, and also a lot of private institutions have done rigorous research to highlight all the opportunities across Africa. So that has created a momentum towards Africa that we're witnessing today.
Let's have a look at where the money's coming from. You've got a growing sector of pension and institution money locally within African countries that are looking for a new investment home. Traditionally, they've invested in government bonds, and obviously, they're looking for other avenues of investment. So that is where a lot of the real estate funding is coming from. Obviously, there's Nigeria, which is the big West African economy. Ghana, which is perceived as a safe, business-friendly sort of entry port into West Africa. And the new one that's coming up is Cote d'Ivoire.
I'd like for you to share your experience as an investor in Africa.
In our case, we've been in Nigeria. The group, the family business has been operating in Nigeria for the past 40 years. So in those 40 years, we have seen a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and a lot of transformation as well. In my experience, it's only been getting better year by year. We are still, even though the market is very well developed, we're still missing a lot of things. Some basic things such as just starting with the infrastructure. We're still very far behind, not even Europe, just other African nations. And it's been improving, but we still have a very long way to go. Power generation is another issue that we've been facing in the country. And it's been holding us back on some of the sectors, such as manufacturing, because we currently run on diesel generators, which is very expensive. Recently, the government privatized the power sector. Yeah. It's a very good first move. We're not seeing the results just yet, but I think this will start formalizing over the coming years. We are an oil and gas producing country, and yet again, we don't have enough gas to power our power plants. A lot of gas is exported out of Nigeria, and by the time, for example, some pipelines go all the way to Benin, by the time they come back to Nigeria, there's not enough gas to power the power plants. The good thing is there's a lot of move in the oil and gas industry and in the government to rationalize basically this gas supply. Coming down to retail, Nigerians are among the top spenders in the UK, in the UAE, big spenders in the US, yet we only have 2 small shopping malls in Lagos and a few other small ones. We don't have a large-size shopping mall as an example. And a few more are coming online, and they're always filled up. They're always leased out completely. And we've been noticing a lot of interest from foreign retailers who want to come in to Nigeria, but what's the main challenge? They can't find enough space. So on a real estate point of view, it's a very positive point. On a retail point of view, it's not yet matured. We're not close to being mature yet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just one more point that,
yeah, sure.
that I wanted to bring up is education as an interesting point. 7% of student population in the UK is Nigerian, which is a very high number. We lack, even though we have very good schools in the country and universities, we still lack a lot of that. So really, we are missing everything in the country today.
Thank you very much. Well, that's talking about people development now. We need people, process, and technology. Luis, RICS, which you heard, as a professional body of global presence, you're all over the world. So how do you plan to address the skills gap?
Okay. It's not an easy, there isn't an easy answer to this, and you've mentioned skills gap. The skills gap isn't just Africa, the skills gap is international. I think MIPIM is a very good example of people coming together from all over the world. Wherever you come from, you will know that there is a skills gap where you come from. We don't have enough professionals to deal with infrastructure, burgeoning populations, and the like. Anywhere. And particularly now in Africa, we have a very big push in Africa through our Sub-Saharan African strategy, which we initiated about 2.5 years ago, and we're now rolling out. And that is looking at working closely with academia, with established professional groups and institutions and regulatory bodies across Africa, We're concentrating in 3 hubs at the moment as centres, as spheres of influence, if you like. But it's very much a collaborative approach, and it's all to do with increasing the number of professionals working in the built environment, but particularly in the construction and infrastructure world, so we can address the needs of Africa.
Let's start with the retail, which everyone is talking about because of the growing middle class. I believe that we don't have enough retail spaces, especially in West Africa, with Nigeria as a case study here today, because that's where I operate. Having 2 existing Ikeja and the Palms, yes, and a few upcoming, about 6. We have about 85,000 square meters of retail spaces coming up in Nigeria, which is good, at least by the end of 2015. And I think that's only been driven by the growing middle class and the huge population of over 170 million people in Nigeria. And we'll also look at another asset class is the hospitality subsector. When you look at that, what's driving that? It's the increased foreign investors. You look at the likes of Hilton, Marriott, and Starwood's brands that are all existing right now in Nigeria. And you also look at the REIT asset class. Nigeria has got only 4 existing REIT. UPDC has got 50% of that. I think last quarter, 2014, the HMK tried to launch a REIT, which they are still either in the market or so, which would have contributed to about 25%, with the other 2, which is a Sky REIT and the Union Homes, which have been existing. But the most active one is the UPDC. And what do we need from investors? We need the quality assets to invest in, because for you to set up a REIT, you need to have the right returns for that. A lot of efforts in the housing finance sector by establishing the Nigerian Mortgage Refinance Company, which is meant to refinance existing mortgages and also securitize the mortgages that that are already about to come on. So it's more like liquidating the industry.
If an international investor is coming into a host country, what would you advise that they should be looking for? What are the actual challenges? We've heard a lot about the perception of Africa. What are the actual challenges, and how do you advise people to navigate through it?
Yesterday, we were having a quick discussion of the perception of Nigeria. And usually the first question I get asked when I'm talking about Nigeria overseas is, what about political risk? It's always the same question, political risk. When we are in Nigeria, we see it as business as usual. For example, we had a 2-week or 3-week delay, was it a month delay in our elections? It happens. It slows down a bit the business. It will happen eventually, and life will go on. And actually, we're looking forward to the boom market right after the elections, and we've seen this over and over again. And coming back to political risk, when I look at Europe today, in my opinion, I do see a lot of political risk in Europe. With a lot of elections going on in different countries, we don't know what sort of policies will be coming in the next governments. And with all this talk of defaults, I do see that as also political risk. So I think it's a question of perception as well on our side, different things. Another question I get asked also about Nigeria, it's too related to oil and gas. Oil and gas actually only represents 14% of the country's GDP. Now, on the flip side, it does represent a very high percentage of exports. But we are seeing different actions from the government and the private industry, the private sector, developing the agricultural markets, building a few major refineries. There is now, I think we started assembling cars early on this year.
Yeah.
So all these things basically will help basically reduce the impact of oil exports in the future, and we will also limit our imports as well of finished goods. And that, I think, will basically diversify the economy even more.
Thank you so much. John, very briefly, what are the opportunities available now, and perhaps you quickly look at the low-hanging fruits?
I think there's an undue focus on political risk across Africa. And I must stress that Africa is not one homogeneous body. You have so many different countries with different dynamics. But some of the key trend lines that we have to remember is that there's been a political realignment right across Africa. The old-style political parties, which were based on tribes or ethnic lines, don't exist anymore. So you find political parties now go across ethnic lines, and that means that policies are now based on national interests rather than parochial regional interests. And what that does, it's allowed the rule of law to become supreme. And we've seen this in a few examples. I think yesterday or 2 days ago, the former First Lady of Ivory Coast was sentenced to 20 years a jail term for election malpractices or something similar to that. And the single message from all this is that the law is supreme across Africa now. So regardless of what the political undertones might be, ultimately, the right thing will be done and the law will be supreme. So we have to focus on that element.
So Mark, what should be the entry do's and don'ts, the market entry? You want to enter the African market, what should you do, what should you not do?
Look, I guess it depends on which side of the property spectrum you are. I think the important thing, and we have heard from the panel, and John has alluded to it, but African governments need to do more to create environments which are investor friendly. That's absolutely paramount in terms of transparency, in terms of ensuring that things that you take so for granted, like title for land or of land, are guaranteed, are certain. That when a tenant signs the lease, that there are certain rights, and the landlord can't decide overnight that they have other intentions of the building. So I think that framework, there is a long way to go. In terms of coming into the African continent for the first time, whether as an investor, a developer, a service provider, again, has been alluded to by my colleagues, it's not one place. It is 54 very, very distinct countries. To spend time there, within countries like everywhere else in the world, there are different cities. The cities have different dynamics. There are different powers at play, different requirements. Spend time in Africa, and probably the most important thing is just be very, very careful of the company that you keep. There is incredible intellectual capital on the continent. There are a number of very, very highly regarded professionals, that belong to RICS and other similar organizations. It's, you're not going into uncharted territories and into the wild. A lot of these markets are sophisticated, and as I say, provided you surround yourselves with the right people, you should have an opportunity to go in physically, to listen, to identify where you think the gap is, and then to execute on that. And the last thing, it's a long-term play. If you think you can come into the continent and put up a residential scheme and disappear with the money and clap your hands and call that a quick project, I'm afraid that's not going to happen.
Ruth, just how qualitatively, how big is this middle class, and what's its impact on these opportunities we're talking about?
Coming down to Nigeria again as a case study here, I think it's about 70 to 30 with the under 40s, which constitute to the growing middle class. And obviously that's why the boom in the commercial space, especially the retail and the e-commerce, it's actually very, very interesting right now. But what needs to be done is this middle class needs quality education. We need good educational reform, so they need to be trained properly. That's why I was discussing with Louis yesterday, I was like, we need rigs to be present in Nigeria, especially because, it's a very, very large population, and a lot of people want to play in the real estate space, but you see a lot of quackery. You see a lot of people, because they don't understand what to do. Our university systems don't take real estate as a course. The easiest you can do is estate management. As a lawyer, I studied land law, and that's to know about the legal aspect of land. But in training, we have the NEISV, but we're looking at global standards. And most of the time, if you do the measurements or valuations with the standards that we have in Nigeria, they don't approve that internationally. You still have to do the go through. So if RICS is present in Nigeria or in Africa or however they want to play in West Africa, I need them to be very, 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 very active. And mentoring is also something that is also needed in this industry, which I believe my good friend Mark is going to be, very, very interested in doing in Nigeria very, very soon.
Those investors and developers and interested corporates, etc., who are not present in Africa or don't maybe have too much to do with it on a daily basis, as to what those operating environments are like. Because I think, unfortunately, there's this sort of global perspective that every time you hear of Africa, there's an AK-47 involved, or famine, or disease, and these things are true, and they're very sad, and it's part of the plight of Africa. But when it comes to the economy and the real estate sector, the fact that Ebola broke out in West Africa doesn't really have any direct impact on, real estate investments in Nairobi and other parts. So I think it's a two-way education process. Internally, we need to educate ourselves to achieve the standards to which we all aspire, and those international standards. Similarly, we also need to have a real drive at portraying and painting a realistic picture of the economies and the environments in which we work, so that you actually have a better understanding of where we're coming from.
Thank you very much. So we've had a lot about it. All I can just say is that in terms of the professionals, I know that RICS has an office in Accra now, which is supposed to cover the West African space. Last year in Cape Town, there was a discussion between the Nigerian surveyors and RICS on their collaboration. I also know that the two countries have signed on to the International Evaluation Standards, which are the standards that they use, and they have also both signed on to the IPMS. So on this note, we will drive home what we're saying using the case study of Eko Atlantic. Then we'll come back again and be able to take questions from the audience. Thank you very much.
I hope that you enjoyed the intro on Africa as a continent as a whole, and well, every country is quite different. My main area of knowledge, again, is Nigeria, so there will be a focus on that, as well as Lagos, and eventually an introduction to our brand new city, Eko Atlantic. I'm sure that you've seen this picture of the world, where the whole world is well lit up and Africa is still in the dark. Just as a note, Europe has about 740 million people, and Africa 1 billion. And we are very, very far behind. As the most populated country on the continent, with 183 million people, 20% of all Africans are Nigerian. We are now the largest economy in Africa, with $594 billion in GDP. We had a GDP growth last year of 6.21%. And you can see the impact of the current oil crisis, let's call it. We are currently at 5.5%, which is still decent. Some of the major industries are agriculture, manufacturing, banking, mining, telecoms, and of course, oil and gas. And as I mentioned before, oil and gas represents 14% of the GDP, as opposed to a much higher number. An interesting graph that we use some of the United Nations number is the population growth in Nigeria. We will cross the 200 million people by 2020. We will practically double that by 2050 with 400 million people. It's a bit far away, but by 2100, we would be close to 1 billion people in Nigeria. And that is a very large increase in our opinion. So when it comes to real estate in Nigeria, we have a very large shortage of homes. There's a shortage of 16 million homes, and this shortage is only increasing every year as the supply is very far from meeting the required demand. It is estimated that we need about $280 billion of investment today to meet this gap. I actually think this is a very conservative number. And I think this number will actually grow significantly over the coming years. One of the sectors holding us back is the mortgage industry. So the total amount of mortgage on the market only represents 0.5% of the GDP, which is about $3 billion. There are only $3 billion worth of mortgage loans in Nigeria. And if we want to compare to South Africa, which is 22% of the GDP, with $77 billion of mortgages, and to the other extreme, the United States, which is at 10 trillion. So at 3 billion, we are still very, very far behind. It's an area of huge growth potential. As Ruth mentioned it, there are some government programs now in place to try to tackle this issue. And we are seeing also movement from the banking industry to find solutions to the mortgage crisis. 36 states, and that little bar at the bottom is Lagos. Lagos is actually a bit smaller than that. We are the smallest state in the entire country, yet we have the largest population and the largest economy of the country. With a population of about 20 million people, we have the largest port in West Africa, and we are Nigeria's commercial, financial, and industrial center. Our GDP of $45 billion is comparable to the entire country of Ghana. 40% of the real estate activity in Nigeria happens in Lagos. We have a shortage of 5 million homes, which is about a third of the total shortage in the country. We also have very large shortages in commercial space, retail space, and other sectors such as schools, hospitals, and of course infrastructure. I find this graph very fascinating, this graphic very fascinating. It compares basically the entire region of Sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa, to the country of South Africa. The entire region of Sub-Saharan Africa has a population of 830 million compared to 52 million in South Africa. Yet, we only have 2 million square meters of office space in the entire region compared to 15 million square meters in South Africa. And if we look at retail, only 500,000 square meters for 830 million people compared to 21 million square meters again in South Africa. We are 40 times, maybe more, behind South Africa. Some of the points that have been holding us back in Lagos when it comes to meeting these shortages is basic infrastructure. We are far from having 24/7 electricity. We don't have adequate water distribution networks, sewage networks. Everything has to be trucked in. Even the diesel for the generators has to be trucked in. And that does create a lot of challenge. We have been seeing a lot of improvement in Lagos over the past 10 years with better road networks. Lagos has a very, very ambitious master plan for public transportation, and the construction has started. Whether it's light railway, ferry systems, or even cable cars, and it's looking very good. So one solution that we believe in will help actually these challenges is our new city, Eko Atlantic. And now we'll do a small video presentation on the city, and we'll talk about Eko Atlantic a bit more afterwards.
An entire coastal city is emerging adjacent to Victoria Island in Lagos, Nigeria. An impressive answer to the chronic real estate shortage in the world's fastest growing megacity. A unique opportunity for investors to capitalize on huge development growth, fueled by overwhelming demand. The new financial capital of Nigeria and a new gateway to the continent. This is Eko Atlantic, the making of a city. What began as an endeavour to protect the coastline of Victoria Island from sea erosion has today become a city-building project on a global scale. It was 2 Lagos state governors, past and present, that took crucial action to turn back the clock on a century of coastal decay along the Lagos coastline.
Today, a liability that threatens the entire Victoria Island of Lagos has been arrested and is being converted to a great asset of prosperity.
Eko Atlantic City is recognized as being of utmost importance for Nigeria's push towards becoming the leading economic force in Africa, and the project has the full support of the country's authorities.
I must confess that it's most satisfying feeling to be part of an idea and to see it move from conception to execution and now to implementation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Eko Atlantic City.
When completed, this Atlantic City will not only benefit the promoters of this project, but it will be an important addition to our nation's drive to promote tourism and good living. The project is a great example of partnership, where it brings private individuals and companies who have the knowledge and requisite expertise to transform land lost to erosion into a delightful ocean city. New cities are good. New cities are smart. New cities help to improve our thinking and our lives. It is in this regard that the federal government has given its full support to the construction of the Eko Atlantic City.
This privately funded development started in 2006 when developers and city planners, South Energex Nigeria Limited, a subsidiary of the Lagos-based Chagoury Group of companies, was granted approval to act as the sole authority over the city's planning and growth. The developers' sights are firmly set on the 2020 vision of Eko Atlantic becoming the new economic hub of Nigeria and gateway to Africa. Eko Atlantic is now a vast mass of land covering more than 5 million square meters, or about half the final footprint of the emerging city. A landmass that can be seen clearly from space. The centralized sewage, water and electrical services are the first of their kind in Lagos and are being built to world-class standards. Across Eko Atlantic, all electricity and telecommunications, as well as other utility services, are being installed below street level, a first for Nigeria. Road and infrastructure works are in progress, with over 26 kilometers completed to stone-based level. A further 28 kilometers of underground stormwater drainage is now in place. Work on the canals, bridges and other major infrastructure services are also underway, while construction of the first buildings in the Harbour Lights district has already commenced. And surrounding it all, the Great Wall of Lagos, the mighty 8.5 kilometers long sea defence revetment, the backbone of this entire project.
We are on land that has been reclaimed as an asset of prosperity. This land is protected by a massive wall that can withstand the worst storms and weather conditions that may occur in 1,000 years. This wall, we call it the Great Wall of Lagos. This wall protects both Eko Atlantic and Victoria Island.
When completed, Eko Atlantic will cover approximately 10 million square meters of land. Self-sufficient and sustainable, Eko Atlantic will be a true city of the future, with state-of-the-art urban design, its own power, clean water, sewage network, advanced telecommunications and spacious roads. The planting of 150,000 trees, which began in a dedicated nursery in 2010, is indicative both of the detailed long-term planning and environmental awareness a project of this magnitude requires.
They have reclaimed 5 million square meters of land from the sea. They have built the beginnings of this amazing wall, an ingenious engineering feat. This is something I'm telling you, there will be countless numbers of people coming here to study.
Eko Atlantic's 10 distinctive districts showcase the finest designs in urban development. From the sweeping harbour lights and scenic ocean promenade to the 1 million square meters of the Marina district, which will be the centre for leisure activities and is set to become a major attraction for tourism. In the heart of this iconic city rises the new financial hub of Lagos, of Nigeria, and soon of Africa itself, the Eko Atlantic Business District. 700,000 square meters of prime real estate where international business will get done. From stunning waterfront apartments and a magnificent shopping mall to a world-class international school and hospital, Eko Atlantic is built to succeed on every level.
Although it is not finished, it is already a success story. The road that was lost to the sea is back and is now motorable. The buildings that were deserted are now occupied. Property values have been restored and multiplied, and more buildings are springing up in anticipation of the opportunities that lie ahead.
With the development of Eko Atlantic's first residential and commercial estates underway, local and international property investment is already shaping the progress of this unique city and revealing its potential. As Lagos continues its unstoppable trajectory towards becoming a new financial centre of Africa, Eko Atlantic opens unprecedented opportunities for tapping into the wider potential of the continent as a whole, widely recognized as the foremost global investment horizon of today. Brent Sadler, Eko Atlantic, Lagos, Nigeria.
So Eko Atlantic, 10 million square meters of reclaimed land off Lagos, Nigeria, off the business district of Lagos, Nigeria. We are expecting that by the time it's completely built, there will be 250,000 residents and 150,000 commuters. It is 100% privately funded and, well, was no government funding basically. And Eko Atlantic was last year registered a free zone. Free zones will allow for easy registration, tax and investment incentives, duty exemptions, as well as 100% repatriation of capital, profits, and dividends. So this should help make it a beautiful platform, an easy platform to come in and invest and set foot in Africa. Eko Atlantic, as you can see, it is attached to Victoria Island, which is the current business district of Lagos. We can literally walk from one to the other. Lekki, as you can see on the other side, is a high-density residential area that has developed in the past 10 years only. Above Victoria Island is Ikoyi, which is a high-end residential area. So really, Eko Atlantic is in a very key location in Lagos. Just to note, the catchment area around Eko Atlantic is about 3 million people. So what will we be offering? 24/7 utilities, all again privately funded. So yeah, we will have an independent natural gas power plant, independent water and sewage treatment plants. We want to make it a smart city, so we're laying the foundations by putting all the fiber optic cables from day one. By the end of this year, 90% of the first 5 million square meters of Eko Atlantic, 90% of the infrastructure will be ready. We will have easy access to the master-planned Lagos public transportation network. We have very easy access to the ferry networks. We are a few minutes drive away from one of the Lagos rail stations, and we are actually right attached to the planned West African Coastal Highway, which is a highway that will connect a few countries in West Africa. This was the first time we lit lights on Eko Atlantic end of last year. This is the heart of the business district, a boulevard we call Eko Boulevard. And it was quite an event for us because we actually, for the first time, got to see a finished road, some finished sidewalks, and a bit of light, not just sand and water, which we have been seeing for quite some time. Construction has started. We don't have to wait to finish to complete the 10 million square meters. 11 residential towers are currently under construction. The first building which is a client of ours who bought land, is close to completing a 15-story office tower, which he sold out already. We are promoting a 2,000-student international school to be sort of an anchor to the city, and it's, of course, very well needed in Lagos. Some of the upcoming developments, a large-scale shopping mall, a state-of-the-art hospital. We have a very serious problem when it comes to hospitals and healthcare in Lagos. There are very few quality facilities, and even those facilities are running a bit old. It is time to actually have a proper state-of-the-art hospital. We have the doctors, we have the nurses, we just don't have the facilities. We will soon be launching as well the business district, where we want to attract various headquarters, and we also want to provide very high-quality office space for any companies wanting to set foot in Africa. A quick view of the master plan. Various districts. Our master planner actually happens to be in this room. If you can notice the purple on the map, that's the business district. And if you can look at on the right side, the marina district, on your left actually, it's the marina district which we have started construction on. Here's a shot of the first 15-story building. Here's a vision for the financial district, definitely changing by the day, but hopefully we can achieve this quite soon. This is the marina project, the first project we launched, Azuri Peninsula, where we partnered up with investors, mainly in Nigeria so far, to start the construction of luxurious residential towers. In other parts of the marina, we're aiming for more mid-market segment, more mid-market residential towers. So, coming back to a satellite picture, this is a more recent satellite picture that was taken about 3 weeks ago. We have been very hard at work over the past 6 years just to bring Eko Atlantic to life. And we are very confident now. I mean, the city is practically ready now for operation. The last remaining thing is now actually seeing all these structures come up from the ground, and we want to start seeing some activity hopefully soon. So back to the initial picture. There was an interview with a former French finance minister on a French national TV a couple of weeks ago, and he said something quite interesting. He said that the $4 billion investment in Africa will generate wealth, basically, $300 billion worth of wealth in Europe. I'm not sure how he came up with this calculation. It sounds quite wild, but it sounds good. So hopefully together we can help make Africa shine, and of course, make some great returns along the way. Thank you very much.
Maybe we can just throw a perspective on Eko Atlantic. I mean, for those of you who saw this presentation for the first time, I think you can only agree it's pretty spellbinding and amazing. And I'm sure a lot of you who haven't been into Nigeria and haven't spent time in Lagos are probably turning around and thinking, well, is it too ambitious? And secondly, why in Africa and why in Lagos? So if you don't mind, maybe I could just try and sort of, put things into perspective a little bit.
Sure.
I think the first thing is that you can go into any real estate boardroom anywhere on the continent, and those tables are very, very quickly going to be filled with plans of rather ambitious schemes like Eko Atlantic. There are some which are even more ambitious. The reality is that very, very few of them get to move from the boardroom table into the ground. They're either ill-conceived, they're too big for the scale of the local markets, people can't find funding, etc. So probably the most impressive thing of this presentation that we saw here today is the fact that Eko Atlantic has actually moved from being a piece of paper on a boardroom table onto the ground. I've been there, it does exist. I know Derek David and a couple of other people in this room can testify to the fact that what you saw there today, apart from obviously those nice graphics of the big towers, but certainly the infrastructure and the base buildings are really there. To answer the question about why Lagos, Lagos is on its way to becoming one of the world's mega cities. It is certainly the largest city in Africa. The official population statistics are 13 million. You will notice just listening to everybody how population figures actually vary. I don't think anybody's got a real handle on it. But officially 13 million is the population of Lagos. Local people, as Ronald alluded to, will probably tell you it's closer to 17 or 18 million, a lot of people. If you're going to judge it on a population basis, it's the 15th most populous city in the world. So it's big, it does have scale. You've also heard from everybody that infrastructure can't cope with the size of the city. Traffic jams are absolutely everywhere. You've heard about the diesel and the lack of electricity. All of that is real. It means that living in Lagos is quite challenging, and working in Lagos is definitely less efficient than it is for a city of a similar size elsewhere in the world. So
I think if you're going to have a look at those gaps, they're very, very nicely plugged by Eko Atlantic in terms of it being a single live, work, and play environment.
And my question would be, what's the impact of Eko Atlantic on the growing middle class? There is a huge demand for affordable housing in Nigeria with over 17 million housing deficit. How is Eko Atlantic going to help us to close this gap?
Okay. Thank you very much. As we had earlier said, first of all, let me just put that in perspective. The 17 to 20 million housing deficit that we're talking about, part of the challenges are lack of access to mortgage finance. And as the panelists had said, we've seen a lot of reforms and the things that have been created in terms of the secondary mortgage market. Now, what is left is capability and affordability of the mortgages. Now, Eko Atlantic, thank you. Eko Atlantic projects in itself is going to create a very big opportunity for employment. It's going to create big opportunity for entrepreneurs to also be able to get things to do there. We're talking of a financial hub in the middle of the city, and we are talking about world-class projects. A lot of our middle class now, I'm sure about 20% are made up of the diasporans that are returning. The generation of children that went abroad have decided that they want to come back home and build back home. So they are coming. Now, that also means that the Eko Atlantic project will have some quality people to work within it and then generate enough income to light up Europe and light up Africa, because that money will increase their capability to afford the mortgages we're talking about, and that will help with the investments in the housing sector as well.
When you have a project like Eko, or how do you go about raising the money for it? What's your first stop? I mean, you just call markup, or, I mean, do a global roadshow, and maybe if you can also touch on the growing role of private equity in Africa, please.
Ronald.
So it's actually a really good question, and it's a challenge we've been facing, and we've seen different aspects of it. There's two aspects of it. First of all, we do sell land to developers, to sub-developers basically, and we've done relatively well. We have, as Eko Atlantic, blocked a few areas that where we want to control the development so that we can push it faster, and there are some key developments such as the shopping mall, the school, the hospital. These we do want to keep a certain control at least to see them happening. So coming back to investors, so far the majority of investors we found is in Nigeria. So the construction you see in the marina, it is so far 100% Nigerian funded. We created a company, and where we partnered up with the investors to start a development on a certain large scale. We are, however, interested in now going overseas and attracting a know-how and expertise as well when it comes to investment. We have talked to JLL, and the conversation has started as JLL just moved into the market. It's tricky. It's a bit tricky because mixing the right expertise, for example, I'm talking mainly retail, hospitals, it's finding the very right operating partner, as well as investors who don't want to just milk the project and who do believe in a long-term vision. They don't want to just exit after 3 years, make their 30% IRRs, and leave us hanging in the dust. We have investors interested in that aspect, and we have we have shied away, let's say, from that approach because we do look at the long-term impact on those sorts. So we are starting that approach through companies moving into Nigeria, such as JLL.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald.
I would be interested to know how the environmental issues were addressed, because the lagoon was filled, and you mentioned also energy issues. Yeah, I would like to know a little bit more about it. Thank you.
Very good. When it comes to environmental, the first thing I would look at is power generation, as it is quite hydrocarbon consuming. Today, the way we run diesel generators, every home that can afford that has diesel generators, they run very inefficiently. They run probably 3 times not as efficiently as a proper power plant. And they don't burn cleanly as well. So just shifting away to a natural gas power plant, and eventually as we expand to a combined cycle gas power plant, we will have a much, much more efficient electrical system. When it comes to water treatment, we are looking at some of the latest technologies when it comes to that. That's more on the consumer side. But then when consumers do consume their water, it goes into sewage. And that's also an issue we have today in Lagos, where the sewage capacity, the sewage treatment capacity is not there. So, and it's not that expensive. That's the most interesting part about sewage treatment. And it's not that big in terms of size, as we are finding out. And it has a huge impact, because treating water, we can then get gray water, which we can reuse for irrigation, or we can use for district cooling, as an example. And we're currently looking at the two options. But all the water that is actually sent back into the canal is to the levels, to any international levels. And that also helps on the environmental side. One last point, because you mentioned green building. It is a topic we have a lot with our architects. How do we design the most energy efficient buildings? It is challenging sometimes to get LEED certified, let's say platinum. We can forget about it today. We don't have all the recycled materials on the market today to meet all those, to fill up all the points. But we can reach a certain level where buildings are much more efficient than the way we previously have built them, whether it's for cooling and for, especially for sun glazing and all that aspect of it. So we are looking at it. We are trying to find solutions. We are following what's happening around the world, and hopefully, when it comes to cost, it becomes as cost competitive as normal, or even more cost competitive than traditional construction.
I live in Lagos as well, and one of the greatest achievement I've seen so far of the Eko Atlantic City project is that Great Wall of Lagos. I pass through that road every day, morning and evening, and now we're no longer afraid when it rains, because we don't have the ocean surge again, you know, and that's been very good. And every December now, I think the last one was the 3rd edition, we now have the
Lagos Countdown.
The Lagos Countdown, you know, and it's always a very beautiful place. We had 3 million bottle tree, this last one, you know, and all these were created because of that Great Wall, you know, which had put the ocean where it belongs. Thank you.
Let me just add one point to add to that. Just to put the context, in 2005, Lagos was being completely flooded and completely eroded. Some of the roads, on the coastal roads on Eko Atlantic, were completely underwater, and it was actually very scary. And I don't think we would have survived another storm.
Yeah.
And the solution we did come up with the government, because initially what they were used to do, they used to come, pump sand, a few years later the sand is washed away. Do it again and again, which wasn't very economically sustainable. So we worked a plan with the government, a two-phase plan, which is basically to first build a sea defense system to protect Victoria Island, and eventually build a city behind and reclaim a lot of Eko Atlantic used to exist, but it has been eroded over the past 100 years. So it is finding a solution to a long-term problem, which is sea levels rising possibly, and more erratic weather as well.
I think it was a very powerful presentation. Eko Atlantic in particular showcased what is possible in Africa, and it showcases that very large ticket investments can be done successfully and to international quality standards in Africa. That's the main thing I took away from this. And the audience participation was fantastic, because for one of the few times I've seen people focus on the positives of Sub-Saharan Africa rather than all the normal issues of conflict and corruption and fraud.
The numbers that came to the seminar today were brilliant. It was the first time, I believe, that MIPIM has run a session like this, and the enthusiasm and the support for it has been great, and it's growing.
I mean, when you see Eko Atlantic, you almost think Dubai, don't you? You cannot help but to draw the similarities between the two. I think the fact that it's real, it's on the ground, it's something that is tangible, you can go there and see it with your own eyes, etc., differentiates the Eko Atlantic offering from a lot of other stuff that is touted around African markets. I also think that for a lot of people that were here today, it was pretty eye-opening to see the scale and the ambition of the project. And yeah, I think that Eko Atlantic should almost become a marketing tool for the potential of real estate in the continent. because it's such an outstanding example.
In our case, let's look at Eko Atlantic as a platform. We created this platform that makes it very easy for investors in Nigeria and overseas to invest in real estate in Nigeria. A few years ago, we were still reclaiming sand and the infrastructure was still very basic. Now, as of the end of this year, 90% of all our infrastructure for the first half of Eko Atlantic will be ready. So it makes it easy for investors to come in and start developing in Eko Atlantic and therefore in Nigeria.